In 2017, I ran my first ever marathon, and I didn't try any other distance shorter than the marathon before jumping into the marathon distance because it was just always a bucket list item for me, and I wanted to do it. I don't have any footage from the training back in 2017 because I wasn't as much of a narcissist back then. Good 3 miler. Ended up getting 6:36 on each split, so that's a win. I did have way too much confidence in my athletic ability, thinking that I could go under 3 hours on my first attempt with very minimal training because I was a good runner in the past. Meaning I ran pretty well in 8th grade. Keep it up, Eric! First marathon, Chicago Marathon, 2017. As I mentioned, in this race, I thought I could go under 3 hours, so I ran the first half in 1:35-ish, I think. And I think around that point, I realized I'm already off pace and I feel terrible. By mile 14, I had a stomach cramp, I had to use the restroom, and then nothing was the same after that point. I essentially walked most of the second half, and came through the finish right around 3:50. 3:50:01 to be exact. I think I had heard that you need to do gels, so I think I supplemented with a couple of gels throughout the race with no plan at all. I knew that they didn't taste good and made me feel nauseous, so I just kind of sent it and figured out that the marathon is a beast. It was a miserable experience. I remember in the middle of the race feeling like I never want to do this ever again. And then shortly after, I was laying on the couch at home thinking, I have to do that again. I gotta do it better than that. I immediately signed up for the 2018 Chicago Marathon, got in the raffle. Some context, I'm a wedding photographer and filmmaker, and then realized I had booked a wedding the day before the Chicago Marathon of 2018. I was signed up and I still decided to run it. But because of the job where I knew I would be on my feet for 10 hours the day before, I didn't take training seriously at all. And I think I maxed out at maybe 20 or 25 miles a week in a couple of weeks leading up to the race. Chicago Marathon, 2018, 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 47 seconds. The very minimal training and no attention or care to the training prior to the race proved itself in the race. And in this one, I didn't even try. I knew it was going to be slow, so I went out at what was relatively easy pace for me, around 8:05 to 8:10 per mile. Went through the half in about 1:45, and again, got completely demolished in the second half. I remember feeling like at mile 18 and 19, like I was going to puke my brains out, and I did. And hobbled to the end again to get just under 4 hours. And again, I had the same feelings of I never want to do this again. It's way too miserable. I think this race is really what lit the fire underneath me. I'm not going to allow this to be the outcome every single time. So I got super serious the next summer, and I asked a friend who had more knowledge in marathon running to train me and to make a plan for me. And that's when I really started to understand what marathon training looked like. And we got so excited that we wanted to shoot a documentary about it that year that I never edited. That was the year where I actually started to comprehend training and putting volume into training, like actually increasing weekly mileage every week leading up to the marathon, knowing what a taper was and decreasing that mileage a couple weeks prior to the race, and how to start a fueling strategy and the importance of fueling. Chicago Marathon 2019, 3 hours, 10 minutes and 55 seconds. In the midst of this training with my friend Dan, we documented the process of us talking about how aerobic paced miles were really going to help me get the volume of mileage I wanted per week, with specific workouts kind of sprinkled in. In those workouts and those long runs, I was able to start testing what gels were like. I remember trying Morton gels there, and I puked it up immediately in the middle of a long run and committed to never doing gels or goos again, and trying to find another route for nutrition. So that year I decided to try Honey Stinger shoes and RX bars. Although I got through the half in 1:29 and some change, by mile 15, I puked up all the RX bar I ate. My one goal for this race was to not stop running. So I actually puked while running and continued to run the entirety of the second half all the way to the finish. Although my pace fell off drastically after that puke and I wasn't really able to recover, I still ended up pulling through with a 3:10:55. And I ran alongside Kofuzi that race, which was really cool because I'd been following him for a while and it was just sweet to be able to run alongside him. A little precursor. 3 years later. So I was flying super high after that race. I was feeling like, okay, the 3-hour barrier, I mean, that was the goal. That race was to break 3 again and qualify for Boston, which I missed by, over 10 minutes. But that really made me realize that jump from the 350 range down to 310. I really started to understand what it meant to race the marathon and how to train. But I still didn't have the nutrition under control. Which brings us to COVID in 2020, and if you've been following this channel for a while, you saw that I had the ambitious goal in May of 2020 to run 10 miles a day for 30 days straight. And so I ran 300 miles in the month of May of that year, and that laid an incredible foundation for me to work through the summer into the fall where I wanted to race New York City Marathon, which I signed up for and was admitted to. Since I raised a certain amount of money with the charity in 2019 in Chicago, they gave me a bib to New York in 2020. By summertime, we found out that the race wasn't going to happen, so I decided to run my marathon virtually along the Chicago lakefront. And this was right around the time when I started Floberg Runs, this channel, before I abandoned it for 2 years. By the time fall came, I had trained, done a full training block, high mileage and everything. Switched to strictly Honey Stinger chews for nutrition. I had my friends follow with a bottle of water and electrolyte drink, and we sent it along the lakeshore. It's my favorite medal. 2020 Chicago Lakefront Virtual Marathon, 3:05:23. So this was a massive PR. In the training block leading up, I had every indication that I was going to go under 3 hours. I remember an 18-mile workout where I think I ran like 6:38 per mile for all 18. And I felt like my fitness was there, but again, my problem was nutrition and salt intake. There was a really challenging component to this race because by mile 8, I got hit by Lake Michigan coming around the Oak Street Beach bend, which was wicked. At mile 8, having to be wet the entire rest of the marathon, with it being like 34, 35 degrees, it was really hard psychologically and physically. Plus there was a ton of headwind coming back on the lake that day, like 20 to 25 mile an hour gusts. So it was just one of those days where the temperature and the elements were really brutal. So I do wonder if it were a bit warmer and a more calm day with no water, if I might have actually gone under 3 that day, but it wouldn't have been official. So by mile 20, 21, I realized I was starting to fade on pace. And by mile 21, I had a full-blown cramp in my left hamstring and my right quad, or vice versa. So both legs locked up, and I didn't have any salt pills because I didn't know what salt intake was at that point. Now, this is a contested thing in the running world. Ever since this point, I started taking salt pills throughout my marathons because I didn't want something like this to happen again. And whether that is what caused it was a lack of salt or not, I haven't cramped like that since this race. So I was able to hobble through the last 5 miles and still finish with a 3:05:23, but I was absolutely destroyed physically. The next 2 hours after the race, I could barely even walk and stand up, and I ended up puking 2 times at our studio at the after party. But got that new PR, unofficial, and gave me more confidence going into the next few years, actually being able to crack that 3-hour mark, which I had been going for now 4 years. Now, unfortunately, with how excited I was with running, a week after that marathon attempt in 2020, I decided to go out for a 13-mile run, and by mile 12, I felt a sharp pain in my ankle and realized I might have overdone some of the recovery. So for the next week, I was trying to manage the pain through ice and massage and exercises, and it just kept lingering. As the pain continued to stay through months after I got x-rays, nothing was wrong with the bone structure. There was no fracture or anything. So I went to a physical therapist and he confirmed that I had posterior tibial tendinitis, which was just a huge blow to me, and recognizing like this could significantly impact my marathon effort this fall. My 2020 New York City Marathon was postponed to 2021, so that was going to be my peak race in 21 and not Chicago. I was gonna do everything in my power through that late summer and fall to make sure that I can make it to New York health. So I went through physical therapy for 3 months. In physical therapy, I learned that strengthening that ankle and doing a multitude of full leg exercises would strengthen that ankle, working myself back into volume week to week as I approached New York in November. It worked. I graduated from PT and took all those exercises back home to do at home and manage the pain regularly. And one thing I asked my PT was, am I always going to experience this pain from now on? And he said, it's something you're always going to have to deal with. So at least having a good perspective on what that's going to be and that I can manage it through the years gave me the confidence that I could continue to train and continue to get faster. New York City Marathon 2021, 3 hours, 11 minutes, and 53 seconds. Now, because of the injury and the need to do physical therapy regularly in the months leading up to New York, I wasn't able to train at the volume that I really wanted. I wasn't really able to extend my fitness in the way I wanted. And with New York being a much more difficult course than Chicago, I wasn't able to go under 3 or even really come close to my PR of 3:05. The Queensboro Bridge absolutely destroyed me on mile 16, and it was a walk-run combination to the end from there. So I ended up with the 3:11, almost 3:12. But at the time of my life, New York is one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in marathon running. It was there that I met Joe Greer. That was his first marathon, and we decided to do a documentary the next year on his next marathon attempt, which is a whole different part of my life. All of that got me so inspired. I met Seth James Damore that day, saw Hella Sadibe at like mile 25. I was just so stoked about marathon running and knew that I would come back with a vengeance in 2022. So because of that, I trained minimally through the winter and then did a training block through the spring, which was the first time I would ever attempt a marathon before the fall. And I signed up for Grandma's Marathon up in Duluth, Minnesota. It's known to be kind of like the CIM of the Midwest, net downhill throughout the entire course, A to B, along Lake Superior, very beautiful and slightly rolling downhill course the entire way. So a lot of people go there to PR. I knew that Kofuzi would be running this race, and I had no idea that Ben Johnson would be pacing him, but I found them in the starting corral and we decided to run most of the race together.
Okay. Getting started here at Grandma's. We got Eric, we got Ben, we're ready to roll, let's go.
I think the goal was to run all of it together, but I ended up falling apart again. Grandma's Marathon 2022, 3:03:53. Up until this point, this is the most tenacious I ever was in a training block and getting the volume and workouts that I needed to be as close to sub 3 as I thought I could be. After New York and the heartache of experiencing that course and going to a fast one, I really wanted to take this one seriously. And then the added benefit of seeing Michael and Ben in the starting corral and running with them for most of the race, I really thought I was going to do it. I remember going through the halfway point, definitely feeling it and feeling Michael starting to fall back. I was still with Ben Johnson. He was pacing us at a pretty significant clip, I think at 2:57, 2:58. I remember at 17 going ahead of him and saying like, I feel way too good, pull me back. He told me to chill out and I didn't. And I kept pushing the pace. And by mile 20, I was absolutely wrecked. I was still doing honey stinger chews at this point and not supplementing enough calories back into my body. I brought liquid IV on the course. I was trying to supplement with electrolytes. I was taking in enough water, but still nutrition was my problem and I wasn't getting enough calories in. And this is the race that really made me realize this. By mile 20 and a half, I was puking my guts out again and I just wasn't able to recover. And it was a walk run to the end again. And I was still able to manage a 3:03:53. So had I finished that race and actually had the nutrition to bring me through to the end, I think I could have run a 2:56 or 2:57. I was happy with a new PR, but still super upset that I wasn't able to bring it to the finish line without stopping again. 2019 was the only race where I was able to not stop at all, and it just really frustrated me. So I committed to trying even harder over the summer. I had a new friend coach me. He's a 2:21 marathoner, and he helped me develop a training plan that really attacked more workouts and not as focused on volume as much. Even though we were hitting 50 to 60 miles a week, I was doing more 800-meter repeat and 1 mile repeat workouts. That really extended my fitness, got me faster, and with enough volume, I was able to approach Chicago in 2022 with a lot more tenacity. And I committed to find a gel that supplemented those calories, got enough nutrition in my body, and that ended up being Spring Energy. Chicago Marathon 2022, 2 hours, 57 minutes, and 8 seconds. Now, this is the first race where we decided to document again back on Floberg Runs on this channel, so I won't go super in depth because I already have a race vlog and a full breakdown of this, which you can watch if you'd like. But this was finally the moment where I unlocked that sub 3. I finally had enough information in my head, knowing how to run the marathon with all these failed attempts, finally figured figuring out my nutrition with 6 gels throughout the course, getting enough calories in my body, taking in Gatorade, training with Gatorade, doing all of the right things and all of the studying coming to fruition in one day with great weather and great conditions. And I was able to get about 3 minutes under the 3-hour mark and finally get that Boston qualifying time. It was insanely special and a day I'll never forget. So many friends and family on the course. It was just so fun to be able to do that on my home course and experience that all, and to have the race vlog to still remember it. I still listen to it on training runs for motivation. Super fun. And earlier that year, I decided to enter the raffle for New York, and I won the raffle, which I think is like a 3% chance. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll just run New York again, even though it's a month after Chicago. Might have been a massive mistake. New York City Marathon 2022, 3 hours, 37 minutes, and 28 seconds. I did not have high expectations for this race. It was by no means a peak race, being a month after my finally getting sub 3, being a hard course and knowing that it was going to be a hot day. I still tried to go for it, but I was absolutely destroyed. Doing all the right things, heart rate was skyrocketed at the halfway point, and I decided to walk run the entire second half. Yeah, I just wanted to enjoy it and not necessarily suffer. So I don't know, I don't really like talking about it all that much. Still an awesome day. Got to see a ton of people, had a blast. It was a good time. Hey, sometimes there's races that are like that and you just can't be mad about it. But reflecting on how Chicago went a month prior, I had never stacked 2 training blocks together in 1 year. And I think that was also a very significant part of my success in Chicago that fall. And then subsequently, my success in the spring of 2023, stacking a 3rd block on top of those 2. Now, if you've been following along for the past 4 months, we documented the entire process week by week for me trying to go under 2 hours and 50 minutes in the marathon. So I started that challenge, that endeavor in January of 2023, did one of the most massive training blocks I've ever done, highest mileage, highest intensity. Knowing all I knew from Chicago that past fall, I figured I could take a crack at sub 250, and we went for it. Carmel Marathon in Indiana, 2023, 2 hours, 48 minutes, and 41 seconds. So clearly I'm in a new phase of marathoning where I've figured something out. And honestly, it took me 5 years to get there before I really understood how to race it, how to do nutrition, how to take drinks throughout the race, all of that. Training, volume, intensity of workouts. It's been a process. And I really hope that this video is just a story in where you could recognize that sometimes these things take a really long time. And depending on how intense you want to be with your studying, that would most likely shorten that window for you. Go do the research, follow along on this channel. I want to give a ton of advice in my experience and what I'm learning in the process. And I know there's still tons to learn. And that's why I'm setting a new scary goal this fall of 242, sub 242, and maybe even taking a stab at 240. We'll see. Be in Chicago again this fall. I'm going to try it. Like and subscribe if you're interested in following along that journey. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any questions about anything in this video, leave them down in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time Floberg runs. Go get it.